Owners, we want the players to back the agreement. Of course, they're holding up the March Accord. The players, we want to get back on the field for the right place. Fans, money, at this point, nobody cares if you come back. And of course, many Americans have been hurt by the COVID-19 with high unemployment, particularly in the state of New Jersey. People looking to just go back to work and start their jobs anew. Hi, this is Will O'Toole bringing you another sports history program. I'd like to welcome you again to the show, and I'd like to thank you for letting me into your homes and talk for the next 30 minutes or so about baseball, sports, and all things in between. This week, I know that the Players Association, along with the owners of Major League Baseball, are trying to come to some sort of compromise or agreement about reopening the game and getting it started. And I know that they've had starts and finishes or beginnings or just disruptions in the whole process. And of course, it all has to, the stickler is always about money and how much the players want to be paid and how much the owners are willing to pay the players. And there is probably, unfortunately, you're going to see this happen, probably going to have to go to the courts to settle the whole prorated salaries that the players are and the owners are squabbling about. And at this point, I have to be very honest with COVID and the recent state of the United States, the whole situation that's going on. I frankly think that most people don't care whether the players and the owners ever have a resolution on this. And even if they take to the field in any part of 2020, I recall as a kid that we would just couldn't wait for opening day, because that was really the signal that the final days of summer or the final days of school were upon us, and that summer was right there on the horizon. And I think that's been missing and lacking in many school kids today. Anecdotal, yes, but then I did some research on it, and I have discovered that, even though baseball has risen, quote unquote, as a participatory sport, it has not ascended to the levels of other sports, and we'll get into that in a couple of seconds. I think, and I fear, I guess I fear it as being a big baseball fan, that baseball may go the way of boxing and what hockey has been perceived as being just a niche sport, that it's only followed by a certain few, a very eclectic group of fans, and that it doesn't have this overwhelming national support. The only thing I got to say, though, with hockey, it keeps expanding. And I just was looking today, and I love doing research, and I didn't want to just do it off the cuff necessarily, but I said, with hockey, I know that there's always been more American teams, even though it's seen as the Canadian sport. And so I was looking at the franchises that are playing right now, or not playing, but are in the NHL. And of the 30 or 30 plus franchises, and soon to be with the Seattle franchises, do you realize right now there are actually more teams south of the Mason-Dixon border in hockey than there are north of the American border? That is, that there are teams in places like Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arizona, and of course I'm nickel-diming that. I'm saying Arizona, yeah, it is south of the Mason-Dixon border, but we're talking about teams in the deep south, in Dallas. All right, St. Louis. I didn't want to use St. Louis as part of this, and I actually left them out of the whole number. But you have teams even in California, in Anaheim and Los Angeles. Now, technically, they're all south of the Mason-Dixon border or the Mason-Dixon line. But think about this. There are 8 teams right now, and I was being very conservative with this, 8 teams in the NHL, and I didn't include St. Louis originally in this, 8 teams south of the Mason-Dixon and only 7 teams in Canada. Now, why I think that's important? Because if hockey is a niche sport, why are there more teams growing or expanding? Why is hockey expanding in the South rather than in the North? And of course, there's greater population, but I also think that it's starting to have a real interest among the people. Baseball, however, think about this. Baseball has lost interest among a certain demographics. I thought it was anecdotal. I am seeing, though, that it really is, my perceptions are proving it out. I went to a number of websites. I even have a Times article here, but I'm going to go first to an article I saw on businesswire.com. This is from a couple of years ago. Frankly, I don't know who the author is. I apologize for that. It's written in 2018, so you're talking 2 years ago. And the article is about the fastest growing sports and why teens play them. Teens, all right? Even though baseball has seen an interest grow by about 6% in the United States, it still isn't growing at the same level as other sports. And here are the other sports. Cheerleading. Now, I understand exactly why cheerleading has expanded. One is that there is now competitive cheerleading even at the high school level. I believe you can earn some Division I scholarship or money towards a scholarship for Division I cheerleading. Cheerleading has become competitive, so it's become more of a combination of gymnastics and cheering, and it's always been associated with the big high school sport, which is football. They go hand in hand. Ice hockey. And of course, I just mentioned about how the NHL has expanded south. Well, ice hockey has seen a high level of participation. And ice hockey, I have to be, I think of all the sports that are listed here, the five, is probably the most expensive because not only are you paying for the skates, which can go from anywhere from $500 to $1,500, and the sticks, but you also have to, if you are playing, usually it's a club team, it's not a town team, at least on the lower levels, and you're paying for the ice time because not too many schools that I know of have their own ice rink. Field hockey, in sport, I can tell you, has grown leaps and bounds. My own niece, who happened to be a Big East all-star, she was goaltender of the year when she played at Providence College her junior year. This has seen a huge interest and an increase in participation. And one of the things that my niece has always told me, she played softball and she likes baseball. She follows the sports, but she likes field hockey because it's faster. It's a faster paced game. And there is more action than, let's say, in a softball game. Rugby. This has always been a crazy sport. It's tackle football without the equipment. I know that Villanova for years had a rugby club team way back in the 80s, and even earlier than that, I had a buddy who played rugby at Villanova, so I know. Bloody noses were, as soon as you walked on the field, I think they were bleeding. But also rugby has increased in participation. And I think it's just because of the nonstop action of it all. And of course, the top one is the one that should be most concerning to baseball fans. It's a spring sport, very similar to hockey. Many of the plays in this sport are very similar to basketball, but it is lights out running pretty much 95% of the time, and that's lacrosse. And I happened to coach for a couple of years with the lacrosse. Didn't know too much about the sport, just loved being around it. And I always ask the kids, did you play lacrosse, since you were a little kid? Most of them said they did, that they actually, many of them, and of course this is the anecdotal stories, but most of them started in Little League and just found out it was just too boring or they couldn't hit the baseball. And in lacrosse, they say you're always involved in the game. Either you're running onto the field, being part of the action, running off the field, getting back onto the field, but it was nonstop running, and this is what the kids liked. And they also liked a little bit of the competition, and also, the just the physical nature of the game. It is a tough game. It's a physical game. You can get hurt just like in any other sport, but I think it has the same kind of interest as football. They love the bang, but it's where football's played in the fall. Here's lacrosse being played in the spring, and it is waging a huge battle with baseball. And I actually did a study on this a couple of years ago and found out that one of the biggest states in the union where lacrosse is growing leaps and bounds is the state of Georgia. Now, why I think that's important, because Georgia and Deep South, you think that most of the kids would be picking up a wooden bat or an aluminum bat in this case, the ball and glove in the spring. Instead, they're picking up a lacrosse stick and tossing a rubber ball against the wall instead of a baseball. So I think it's a huge concern for baseball, but they seem to be ignorant of the fact that baseball is losing a generation, indeed probably a couple of generations of baseball fans. And we can talk about that in the next couple of minutes. In fact, the New York Times, I just wanted to see this. Well, ESPN also, youth baseball participation on the rise. ESPN had an article. This was from last year. It did say that U.S. Baseball was on the rise, that more than 25 million kids played baseball or softball in 2018, and nearly 15 million of those were core players who played 13 or more times in a year. 13 or more times in a year. First of all, I stopped when I saw that, because we used to play 13 or more times in a day. Now, maybe it wasn't quote unquote with an umpire and a manager and on a field, but we were playing baseball all the time, whether it was with a stick ball and a tennis ball or a rubber ball, whether it was actually a baseball or a softball or even a wiffle ball in our backyards. We were playing baseball nonstop. And we probably only took a break to either cut the lawn, have lunch, go swimming when it was extremely hot. Some kids maybe go fishing or going camping, whatever. But when I saw that 13 games, that's really just, see, what they're missing here is 13 games is just basically a little league season that goes from May until June. And then if you're good enough and you have enough interest, then you go on and you play in the travel leagues. But kids only playing 13 times, think about it. You can go anywhere right now, and I'm saying outside of the COVID-19 and all the rest of it. You can go last year, you can go to any field and find it barren of kids playing ball. In fact, it knocks your socks off when you do see kids playing baseball. Most kids are playing basketball, or if they're not on their computers, playing the computer games. Basketball is on a bigger rise than baseball. And for every travel league baseball team I see out there, I can find about 5 travel teams. And there are kids who are playing in about 4 or 5 travel teams just during the summer, let alone in the fall and in the spring and in the winter. So I found that article amazing, and this was from last year, just 11 months ago or 10 months ago, ESPN saying that 13 or more times in a year. That's a joke. All right? Basketball, kids are playing nonstop. Try getting onto a basketball court somewhere. The kids are playing nonstop. I don't care whether it's suburban, urban, or country. Kids are playing that nonstop. And there was, and this was the article in the Times. This is what they were bringing up in the Times, and that was that baseball, how popular is baseball really? And of course, this is an article from October of 2019, just last October. And it says here, it states, it's well documented that attendance at Major League Baseball has been declining since 2012. Guys, think about it, 2012, that's a decade that it's been on the snide. About 68.5 million fans attended Major League games during the 2019 regular season, down from a peak of nearly 80 million in 2007. Why is baseball losing fans? Well, it's twofold. One is the tickets are just outrageous. And to spend the kind of money for a family of four, mind you, a family of four. I was from a family, we had 6 kids, mom and dad. When we went to a baseball game together, that consisted of probably, our month's allotment for fun. Today, you go to a baseball game, the amount of money just spent on a decent ticket, and then the amount of money that you're purchasing on the food, it costs a family of four about $800 to almost $1,000. That's if you get good seats and you're there from, the first pitch to the ninth inning. And that is if you drive there, now you're paying for parking and all the rest of it, and you buy a souvenir, the whole 9 yards. It's an investment. It's like going on a week's vacation when we were kids. Not only that, the games, even though they bumped them up to starting at 7 o'clock, because it used to be, I remember when the Mets started at 8 o'clock, but you're still leaving Shea Stadium at 10:30. Today, first pitch is, let's say, 7:05 or 7:07. They're not through the third inning until about 9 o'clock. These games go on and on and on. So the games are interminably long. They can't be watched nonstop. I'm even talking about the playoffs in the World Series. I have a extremely hard time watching the game by myself or even with my son for 9 straight innings when I know that if I start at 7, I'm not going to get to bed until 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. That's if it doesn't go to extra innings. Baseball's got to do something about the time. I'm not saying it should be sped up and edited and, reduced to 7 innings, although I did have that as an idea. I can talk about that in a little bit too. But baseball's got to do something about the time. 3.5 hours, 4 hours at a game, and you can say, oh, you're just enjoying it. No. It's tedious. I'm sorry. It's tedious. And I'm a huge baseball fan. And they do nothing about it. So baseball from both sides are saying this. Well, we have to pay the players, and we get extra income if we have 3 minutes of inaction between innings, commercials. We get extra money if we sell out the fencing for advertising. If now we're going to be able to put little logos and all the rest of it, not that they haven't done it in the past, sell out the uniforms. Pretty soon the baseball players are going to look like racing car drivers with all the little sponsors and stuff, which is fine. They can do whatever they want. It's not about the money. Guys, it's not about the money. I don't care how much a player makes. I think that most people have come to that realization that these are the top flight athletes in that particular sport, that for any given year, there's maybe 700 to 1,000 of them that play at the major league level. And that if you had the 1,000 best actors or the 1,000 best musicians or the 1,000 best doctors or lawyers, they'd be making the same kind of money appropriate to their skill level and also to their particular job or occupation. Now, the only way that salaries come down is if nobody goes and if the interest wanes. And I think this is the crux of my argument with the players and the owners, is that they can drive and they can earn as much money as they can. But what is going to be the cost? Because playing baseball is a job. Owning a baseball team is a business. I am not in disagreement there. But when you own that or you're playing it, you still have to worry about one thing. Where am I getting my income from? I'm getting it from customers. And are you building future customers? And I think that is the problem right now with baseball. They are not building future customers. How do I know that? Just take a look. Ask any kid. And this was further down. Tom Brady is more of a well-known athlete than Mike Trout. And Mike Trout, I'm telling you right now, he is a once in 30-year player. He right now is on the same level as the Mazes, the Aarons, etc., and the Mantles. You're only seeing him once in a lifetime. Tom Brady, a great player, greatest of all time. Everybody knows who he is. And that is the problem, that Brady actually, who comes into your home maybe tops 20 weeks out of the year and only once each week. 20 times you see him potentially in a year. Trout, you can see for 10 straight months potentially. Well, maybe not 10 straight, 8 straight months if he ever got to the World Series in the playoffs. And yet more kids know who Tom Brady is than Mike Trout. Mike Trout, they probably think it's a character from The New Adventures of SpongeBob or something like that. And you're seeing a player in a big market. Yes, it's not the Los Angeles Dodgers, but it's California, Southern California, the Los Angeles market, and nobody knows him. Nobody knows anything about him outside of the real baseball fans and, spread out. Tom Brady, everybody knows him. LeBron James, everybody knows him. Basketball has ascended as the sport, and it is fast becoming, like soccer, the global sport. And the irony is that baseball now has more players from more different corners of the world today than it did 40, 50 years ago when I was growing up. Now you have players today, not just from Korea, but Japan, from Australia. Back in the 90s, you got players from certain parts of Europe. Yeah, albeit not too many, but you can understand. Today, every major league roster is filled with players. I would even say probably about over 50% of all teams are filled with players from either the Caribbean, Central America, or South America. And that's not the issue. The issue is this: they are getting players from all around the world, the top players, and yet the sport is not in tune with the younger generation. And that is going to hurt baseball immeasurably, because this is what my whole point is. You can make as much money as you want now, whether you're a player or the owner or the city that owns that ballpark, but eventually you're going to lose cash because you are not investing it in your future fans. Eventually, guys like me die out, literally and figuratively. We just die. And we can't, and if you can't pass on the game from one generation to the other, it's a lost sport. And baseball, how do I know it's a lost sport? How many games are right now broadcast during the day? That used to be a fun thing when I was a kid. The World Series, listening to a transistor radio. And I agree. Great. You want to move the games to prime time at night, maybe during the week? That's fine. Weekend games, though, having them at 8 o'clock on a Saturday and a Sunday night is not, you can tell me all you want that you're getting all of the potential advertising dollar, but you are missing out on the point when the people who follow the sport are in bed by 10 o'clock and they haven't even seen the whole game. And what's lost with baseball right now, if the adults aren't staying up for the game or lasting until the ninth inning, the kids aren't either. The games are on too late and take too long to play. Now you can say to me, well, what about basketball? They have the NBA Finals at 9 o'clock. Yeah, but when? There's a big difference between allowing your kids staying up, all right, theoretically, because I know these kids stay up. Don't have to tell me. I know they stay up on their computers and all the rest of it. Theoretically, just play along with me, right? There's a huge difference between allowing your kid to stay up at 9 o'clock and seeing a whole NBA game till 11:30, 12 o'clock on a school night in late May and early June, as opposed to a Sunday night game in October with school just basically 6 to 7 weeks in, and you want and you want your son or daughter, or your son or daughter doing or having an outstanding school year, and you're starting those games at 8:30. And yes, you can argue, well, it's only 5:30 on the Pacific Coast. Yeah, but you know what? Baseball did a marvelous job expanding its sport when they started the games at 8 o'clock during the week and played it on the weekday. 75, which has always been probably, it was a huge point for baseball, the 1970 World Series between the Red Sox and the Reds. That was a huge point, and baseball seemed to take off right after that World Series. And one of the things that people forget is that the Saturday and Sunday games were played in the afternoon. That year, I know, wrong year. I know you're going to say that I'm picking the wrong year. The first weekend games 1 and 2 of that 75 World Series were played in the afternoon, 2 o'clock. And then the following week they were supposed to be played, but there was so much rain in Boston and New England that they canceled and had to play during the week. But they still started those games at 8 o'clock. And even the game 6 with Fisk, went past midnight, but there was a great feeling about that. There was tension in the air. And that really only went a half hour past midnight, a couple minutes after that. I think it ended at 12:38. And that was great. Flash forward to the 2004 season with the Red Sox coming from 3 down. Of those dramatic 4 games that the Red Sox came back and beat the Yankees, I maybe saw maybe a third of those innings. I couldn't stay up. Now if I'm going to bed, if I have a child 10, 11 years old, he's certainly going to be in bed, or should be. But the sport itself does not do a good job seeding for the future and growing its business. Instead, it's almost sucking, all the marrow out of the bone right now, getting as much money. And it's both sides, because the players should be worried about this too. Because I'm telling you right now, their worry should be this. You can say all you want about not playing this year, and you say that you want to be full salaried and that, the owners lied. And of course, it's probably going to come down to the lawyers to determine that. Okay, so you get your full pay this year. But what damage are you going to do to the game next year if you don't play this year? Or if you do play this year, what's going to be the damage in terms of public relations for both sides if you only play 50 games and nobody's interested? Because they are, frankly, sick of these fights and squabbles and battles over the money. And it's almost like, are these owners and players this clueless about what's going on? And yes, it's a finite moment that you can earn money in baseball. I told you at the start, I don't care how much money you make. How I wish that could be me. I don't care how much money you profit as an owner, but there has to be a give back some ways. You have to realize that you're making that money because you're in entertainment. And if people are turned off by behavior or by any other problems within the sport or that particular event, they're just going to go away. I'll still play ball. I'll still hit the ball, my brothers. But I'm not really that interested in watching you play. I'd rather be out in the sun. And I think that's what most Americans are feeling right now. Even with the basketball, even with the hockey, they're trying to come back. Their sport theoretically is past because the seasons are done. But baseball is a real problem because those sports are growing. Baseball, I really feel, is not growing at the same pace at the other sports. I was looking forward to this season because, well, I have another cartoon here, and it has something to do with what I was talking about. And I'll show this. I know I usually just show one cartoon, but this one I just did, and it's not even a joke. And the adult says it's called a baseball. It used to be played by every kid in the United States. It was America's pastime. And I'm wondering if baseball has lost so much interest and popularity among the kids that it's past its time. Because as you can see, I have it on a basketball court. The game, the kids or the adult and the son are probably playing one-on-one basketball. And I'm wondering if baseball is past its time in terms of popularity. And that would be a shame, because if there is one sport that embodies American principles of individualism and teamwork in one moment or on the same stage, it's baseball. Because everybody's got to hit for the most part. Everybody's got to field. Everybody's got to run. Everybody's got to play defense. Everybody has the same responsibilities, but everybody has that moment where that individual talent, that individual poise comes out, and you have to produce. And that's what's made it such an enjoyment, and why we talk about players who have had those great moments, who were not really good players or quote good players during the regular season, but boy oh boy, they had their moments in the sun. Growing up, for me, a guy who really made an impact, and he should be with the metrics, was a guy named Gene Tennis, who, because Reggie Jackson got hurt in the 72 playoffs against the Tigers, remember he pulls the hamstring, he is pushed into the starting lineup for the Oakland A's and hits two-run home runs in his first at-bats at Riverfront, and helps beat the Reds in game one. And then, the Reds, the A's go on and win not one, not two, but 3 world championships in a row. And here's the weird thing. Tennis was just a utility player on that team. He had his moment, and then he turned that moment with the 4 home runs he had in the 72 World Series into free agency, and he made a career. And he's a metric guy, probably one of the first metrics guy, because he hit home runs and drew walks and had an unbelievable on-base percentage. We've tackled that already on baseball history about the use of metrics. I don't think the metrics have really hurt the game. I think they've made the game more tactical, more strategic, more like a chess match. It's hurt in terms of this. If you are just a kind of just coming in, like, you're just flying in for, let's say, a couple of games, or you're just going to watch the World Series, and the announcers start giving you the metrics about it. It can be a little tedious, and it can be sometimes a little confusing. But believe me, the metrics has helped the game become even greater played. How do I know that? Well, it's a tougher game now to master with the metrics. Have they gone overboard maybe with the metrics? Okay, but it's like anything else. It's the brand new thing. Everything is about the metrics, and eventually it's going to come down, and people are starting to realize, or going to say, listen, we even have to simplify the metrics. And we're starting to even think, you know what, maybe a guy should go an extra inning and pitch, or maybe the guy should hit in this instance, rather than just rely on the numbers. Even the New York Times posted that about in their article, saying that, if you're reducing the players to numbers, you're losing that fan identification. That was the beauty of baseball cards when we were kids, is that you saw the face and you saw their stats on the back and a little bit of information about them, maybe their hobby, fishing or hunting or whatever, but you had a closeness, a connection to that player. Plus you saw them up close and you had something. You had their baseball card. That was pretty cool. And I think that's being lost, because now it just should be here is player 1B. These are the metrics. Let's match up all the metrics of player 1B and put them on this team, or put them in this position, and all the rest of it. One other thing. The COVID-19, the lockdown, has allowed many fans to watch the old games on TV, either through MLB or on YouTube, etc. They have been very enjoyable. And really, when you think about it, this is how I know that the game is so much, it's a better played game. Not that there weren't great players then. Give you a perfect example. I'm watching the 65 World Series, Game 7, Sandy Koufax and Jim Kaat. 2-0 Koufax wins the game. In today's metrics, two things. Never would Jim Kaat didn't finish the game. Never would Koufax probably have finished that game for one reason. With all the metrics today, the Twins would have forced him to at least pitch about 10 or 20 pitches more before he got to the late innings, say the 7th inning. And maybe with new metrics today, maybe Koufax, remember, he's on 2 days rest in that game. And it's his second to last year in the major leagues because he's going to retire in 66. It's just phenomenal. But 2 days rest and probably an extra 20, 25 pitches thrown in the first 6 innings. Maybe Walter Alston would have had to rely on the metrics, would have had to listen to his general manager, and taken Koufax out. And who knows what would have been the results. They did have Peronotsky in the bullpen and all the rest of it. But you know where I'm going with this. That maybe the metrics of today, they would have brought him out. The other thing, so that's where maybe the metrics of today, all I'm saying is that it's not as hyped, that they probably would have forced more of an issue, put a little bit more pressure. I'm not saying they would have beaten Koufax and that with the extra pitches they would have struck out, maybe not hit the ball, etc. But in that game, Koufax, there were many instances where, they hit the first or second pitch. And then, unfortunately, I'm watching the game, and there's one of my favorite players, Tony Oliva, not making one but 2 mistakes. Now, he is charged for an error in the game, but in another instance, he fields the ball and overthrows the cutoff man and makes a mental error. And today, those same mental errors would have been picked up and maybe exposed, unlike then. All right, because, again, of the metrics. But I will tell you this, if you are watching those games, it's a beautiful thing to hear because you actually hear sounds from the stands. You can actually hear the vendors yelling hot dog, beer, popcorn. And of course, the announcers, there is no pollution in the press box. Scully and Vince Scully, probably the most melodic baseball voice in the last 50, 60 years. And Ray Scott, I just always knew Ray Scott as it always seemed to be the voice of the Packers. They were doing the play-by-play and alternated. It was pretty cool. Ray Scott would do the bottom of the inning for the Twins. Scully would do the Dodger innings. And what I loved the most was they announced the game, had their little anecdotes, had their little stories, but then they allowed the game to just play out. Every pitch was not overanalyzed. Everything that was done was not overanalyzed. And it made it for a nice flow of the game. And I think that's the broadcast booth has become cluttered. The metrics, you could argue, have cluttered. And the broadcast has become cluttered. And the game itself has become cluttered by so many interruptions instead of letting the game flow. I hope you see some of those games, 1965 Game 7 World Series, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And other classics, 69 World Series with the Mets and the Orioles, 71 clash, 75 Game 6 and Game 7. But I hope baseball does rectify the situation and realize that today's game is only going to exist tomorrow if we start feeding the youth and making it attractive to our youth and growing the sport at the grassroots level and also at the youth level. This is Will O'Toole for another Sports History Edition. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you soon. Bye now.